So John Montgomery, please join stage.
Where do you want me to sit? Over there?
Yes, let's do. And John, I met you, actually, you are EVP of Brand Safety at GroupM.
Yes.
And I met you, and I also introduced you 5 months ago in Denmark to IIB. And I have to say, it was a fantastic presentation, so I'm really looking forward to hear everything you have to say today. And I will let you introduce the panel yourself.
Well, why don't we have Nick and Doug back up here, and John, why don't you join me up on the stage in any order you like. It's not musical chairs, we have enough. I'll introduce these, my colleagues in a minute. We were just talking a little earlier about the diversity of our panel. We had a cancellation. It would have been much more diverse if we didn't have that cancellation, but we've got a fantastic group of experts up here. I'll introduce them in a minute, but I just wanted to introduce the session, and the fact that there's standing room only perhaps is the best indication of the importance of this topic. At the beginning of 2018, there are a number of CMO pieces of research that are done to ask CMOs what's important in their year, what are their priorities. And every single one that I read, and there must have been 10 or more, kind of listed brand safety as one of the top 5 priorities or needs that a CMO has. They're really worried about this. In fact, 3 of them listed brand safety as ahead of ROI. So yeah, I'm not too sure about that, but it just shows you the level of concern. And so today we'll see brand safety. I do a lot of these panels. In fact, I'm more often on that side of the panel than I am on this. And it's normally an agency and a client. And today I think we've got a sort of a unique mix of sort of experts to bring a different flavor on kind of brand safety and what it means to be safe in the digital supply chain. And I think what Doug said about trust is absolutely certain, because without that trust, we can see digital spend increasing, and of course it's going to continue increasing because that's what consumers are. But I have to tell you that every single client that I speak to says they would invest more if they fully trusted the digital supply chain. They still find it a little bit of the Wild West. They find it uncertain. They find it non-transparent. And it's a real concern for them. So I think what you'll get from today is some insight, perhaps a little disagreement, perhaps a little bit of controversy about where we are in this. There'll also be time for questions a little later. I really encourage you to ask questions, because every time a question is asked, I think that the rest of you will learn. And I do a lot of these talks about brand safety. In fact, it's all I do. And the kind of best insights are gained through the interaction and questions that have come from the audience. So please, I encourage you to ask questions at the end. So here are our experts. Doug, you've heard from, so I'm not going to introduce you again, Doug. Nick Manning, a veteran of the ad industry, 27 years in the media agency world and 10 in marketing analytics. He co-founded Manning Gottlieb OMD, which is now the largest UK media agency in the Omnicom Group. He's now Senior Vice President at MediaLink. John Snyder is CEO and co-founder of Grapeshot. He leads a 150-strong technology and sales team, and John spent his entire career in the field of information retrieval and keyword technology, with a successful exit from the Muscat information search business in 1997 and a series of investment high-tech startups. So interesting and somewhat unusual panel we've got today. So let me start off with, let me sit down. Let me start off with this, and I'd love you all to contribute to this, but perhaps, Doug, we can start off with you. It's kind of contextual brand safety has kind of been around for many years. I remember talking about contextual brand safety, maybe not those words, but in 2008, but it was only really in the last 15 months, and particularly with the London Times article last February. In fact, I think it was February the 26th, that date is imprinted in my mind, where the big brands Frontera, huge controversy, 4-page spread of the London Times, one of the most venerable newspapers in the world. And it kind of started there. But since then, there's been a huge focus on on brand safety and brand safety measures, particularly by the social platforms, Google and Facebook. And they've improved their tools, they've improved their technology, and their controls over that. So would it be true to say that contextual brand safety is in a much better place a year later now? Is the job done? Are we there yet?
I think it's in a better place, but the job is far from done. If you break down the constituent sort of what I would call silos of brand safety, you've got user-generated content, which is what all the consumers want to post on Facebook. And there's a lot of objectionable stuff in there. And Facebook and Google are doing a good job, and other MarTech companies are doing good jobs to try to get their arms around that. But ultimately, that freedom of expression in those platforms is vital to their survival. So the brand safety issues that are there are never going to be completely solved, and maybe they're never solvable at all. And so the second silo is sort of what the London article is about, and those are reprehensible sites, Nazi sites, jihadist sites that are seeing brand ads pop up there. There's a lot of effort behind correcting that. There's a lot of moves to use technology to do that, and Facebook has said they've hired, I don't know what the number of 1,000 people that they say they've hired to look at this, so that's another good step forward. And the third sort of silo is fake news. And fake news is just as much a brand safety issue as any other, because they're generating their money, obviously, from the ads that appear in these fake newspapers. And while there have been some technology solutions directed to that, the one that I find really fascinating is one that is partially backed by Publicis, is a proposal called NewsGuard, which is owned by a guy named Steve Brill, or run by a guy named Steve Brill, who was a publisher and a reporter. And he's gonna get together hundreds of bona fide reporters, and they're going to rate the 7,500 or so news sites that are newspapers, magazines, as being fake or not fake. And they're going to sort of use old school humans, thank you, no AI, are going to use humans to address this technology problem of fake news. So improvement in all three of those, but there's still more to be done, obviously.
John, what do you say?
So, is this on? We've observed over the last 2 years a migration from looking at sites that might be jihadist to actual single pages. It doesn't matter if it's the New York Times or a strange, sort of small site. It's reprehensible content for that one page load. So clearly we have to go page by page. And it's very easy on the programmatic world to look at URLs in the bid stream, and might not be a known fact, but we're the second largest data provider by revenue on Trade Desk. The largest one is Oracle. Oracle have just acquired Grapeshot. And essentially, we are keeping brands like P&G and others very safe at the page-by-page level. But if you look at fake news, that's a whole new realm. If you look at apps and getting inside an app, it's kind of like the old mantra, oh, that app is all about sports. Well, actually, you've got to be inside the app. And there are new techniques to get inside various SDKs, but it's very hard to be in those. And then more recently, video. There's a lot of communications done through video. So Grapeshot actually in New York today is announcing a video context product. So we profile all the words in the audio track. And so within news bulletins and the like, we can actually unpack the jihadist content within that video clip. So I think brand safety is uppermost in brands. We've seen our revenue grow 180% year on year. And we see a migration from standard, what I call IAB, so it's to do with adult and terrorism, to very custom brand safety. And I think the real thing is if you're Samsung and you have batteries exploding, or you've got an executive who's in court on bribery charges, you want to exploit keyword technology, particularly to safeguard against your own bad news. And we've seen a complete rise in custom brand safety. So no longer has a brand adhering to a standard sense of safety. They have their own needs, and it changes week by week.
So it's not about safety, just about safety. It's about appropriateness as well, right? Yeah. Nick, so in your life, you see a lot of new business briefs, and kind of where does brand safety kind of figure into those? And do you think that clients have a sense that it's better now than it was a year ago?
Yes, there's definitely a sense that some progress has been made, but this is an area where we've only just scratched the surface, really. This is something that will never be entirely fixed. And I think what it's going to take, really, and I haven't got a lot to add to what Douglas said on this, what it's going to take is a combination, actually, of human resources and advanced technology to provide the kind of brand protection, which is a word I prefer anyway, for brands to make sure that in their own context, as John was saying, they get what they want. So it's an area that is very important on the agenda for clients, and they need to have really strong strategies in place to deal with that, which will be a combination of manual and non-manual sources to achieve that in the context that they're looking for. So I agree with what my fellow panelists have said, and I think that at least the issue is out there now and is being addressed.
Yeah, and thanks, Nick. I also think that the issue of fake news, and we probably won't go into that in a great deal of detail today, but the issue of fake news is way beyond brand safety. It's about democracy and the freedom of the press. I mean, it's just way more important. Obviously, we don't want our ads, any of us marketers want our ads funding or supporting fake news, as we don't want them supporting piracy. But it's fundamentally erodes democracy and free press. So it really is one of the key areas, and it's one of them that I think we should hold the big social media responsible for fixing, because it's very, very difficult to detect. It's probably the most difficult thing to detect, right, John? Yeah. So let's, Nick, I really wanted to talk to you about cost efficiency. In my world, I see the relentless pursuit of cost efficiency as a huge contributor to the digital quality problem. Right? And many agencies and clients pursue low CPMs, but inherent in a blunt instrument like a CPM is non-viewable, invalid traffic, contextually irrelevant advertising. And so is CPM a false idol? Is it a vanity metric? Shouldn't we be measuring on a quality dimension, like an ad that's viewed by a human in the appropriate context in the right demographic or something like that?
Well, yes. I mean, the CPM isn't any kind of metric at all. It's a base currency for trading, and it's a machine-to-machine transaction, so it doesn't have anything in there about reaching consumers. And it's a base currency that has now been significantly devalued because people have realized that an impression can be non-viewable. It can be riddled with invalid traffic or ad fraud. It can be reaching the wrong audience. It can be in the wrong environment. So really, the problem with CPMs is that it doesn't tell you anything very much at all apart from what you paid. And very low CPMs are low for a reason. And I think we've realized that now, is that pursuit of cost efficiency has been, was a bit of an illusion. But it's also been quite a good source of profit over the years, because while the industry was busy paying itself on the basis of a CPM, it didn't spend an awful lot of time looking at the quality of those CPMs to see whether they were real or not and being seen or not. So a lot of money's traded hands, really, on the basis of that base currency. And a lot of people have, done very well out of that. But now advertisers have realized, thanks to the people who've made them realize, that actually you really have to interrogate these things far more closely. You have to understand which impressions really matter to you, what level of viewability you should be going after. You have to negotiate that level of viewability. So we need to move to a different set of metrics now. We can't use CPM as any kind of proxy. We need to start looking at effectiveness first and foremost, and starting to really interrogate the effectiveness of online advertising in all its various forms, rather than looking at intermediary metrics that are basically KPIs to get you there. They're important, viewability and things are important, but they don't tell you whether the advertising was effective. Yeah. They just tell you whether it stood a chance of being effective. And effectiveness is the only game that really matters in the end. So that's why the focus should shift to that.
It's a good old opportunity to see, isn't it? I mean, and I'm sorry, I'd love to hear your views, but are there any agencies in the room? Well, there are a couple of us. Nick, I just wanted to explore this a little bit more. What is your advice for those of us in the room who get a brief in a new business situation which calls for a 10 or a 15% reduction in CPMs in the next financial year? I'm told by our new business teams that more than half of our briefs still contain CPMs, and if we don't play that game, we're not in the game. So what is as a consultant, what is your advice to the media, to the agencies in the room? How do you manage that when I think all clients will admit that CPM is a false idol, yeah. But if you don't play the game, you're not allowed in, right?
Yeah, well, the primary role of any media agency, first and foremost, is to come up with media strategy and planning that is the best for the client in terms of delivering effectiveness. So if somebody says, okay, you've got to reduce the CPM by 10 or 15%, you say, well, what's the starting point? So the first thing you need to do is get the strategy and planning right. And then you need to look at the historic benchmarks against what you're actually buying. If it's just a case of saying, take the average CPM down by 10 or 15%, that's the wrong place to start. So the first thing first, strategy and planning first, is the most important thing there. And making sure that you can prove that the media mix you're offering to your client is the best possible media mix to produce effectiveness. And then it's about competitiveness of pricing in that order. So I think we need to still put the horse before the cart rather than the other way around, particularly in pitch situations where it is not, it's an inside-out approach to say, buy me more cheap media, because if cheap media has been part of the problem, that sure as hell isn't the solution.
Yeah, you get what you pay for, right? So John, you wanted to say something as well, I think.
We were serving both GroupM directly, but also Xaxis at the time when they had a kind of non-transparent model. And the interesting fact is when we looked at all the analytics across many campaigns, we found when they used contextual technology like Grapeshot, they're actually paying higher CPMs, yet it backed out to really good conversions. Now, we do recognize that brands today also want brand awareness and brand lift and other metrics, but it was ironic that it took the non-transparent era of programmatic to prove the point that what you buy in terms of whether it's moat viewable or Grapeshot and contextually relevant, pay the higher CPM because that's how you get the best results.
Yeah, we're on an absolute bender globally. We have a project called Quality Sells, and we're trying to prove that by paying a little bit more, ultimately you'll get a better advertising result. So that's completely correct.
Yeah, and that's all about effectiveness. So if you can demonstrate that a powerful piece of video at a $20 CPM is effective for your brand, but a display ad at $2 CPM isn't, then why are we in the room? It's up to the media agencies to put the priorities of the brand first and get the strategy right, and then negotiate the prices on that rather than the other way around.
Yep.
Just to add one point to that, it occurs to me that there are certainly a subsector of brands who are very sophisticated and they can figure this all out and they can make their judgments. But the vast majority of the brands, the agencies are a lot smarter, and they understand the industry and the issues of effectiveness and measurement more. So it strikes me that when you see something like that, you've got to educate the brands better. The brand community needs a lot of education here, because otherwise they'll just go to the easy place, which is CPM.
Yep.
When it really, from every sort of expert here is saying that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it'll take a while for the reality to catch up with the strategy, I think. But I think that most people are starting to understand that now. But still, we get the briefs for CPMs, and still you have to, you have to respond.
Well, you stop with spec pitches, right? I mean, so let's stop.
Yeah, I wish. Doug, this one's for you. This one's for you. Contextual brand safety threatens the reputation of brands, and that's why we take it so seriously. But could we be overreacting to the embarrassment of a single brand image being screenshot near inappropriate content by a journalist? We know this happens. We know that journalists are trolling the dark corners of the web to try and do a gotcha on P&G brand to say, hey, this is brand unsafe, and particularly to expose Google and Facebook, who are taking away their lunch. Do brands and agencies need to accept that there's a risk associated with social media? Do you think we've pushed it a little bit too far, and do you think it's corporate communications that's causing the scare and the embarrassment rather than the real brand damage amongst consumers?
I certainly think there's a degree of that, and historically we've seen it in the past where brand safety existed way before the internet came along, with people making false rumors about brands and that kind of thing, and it was relatively manageable then. So we could bring out the battery lawyers and tear people out of flea markets that use Mickey Mouse without permission and all those kinds of crazy things. Today it's a whack-a-mole game, and you can't win a whack-a-mole game. So you have to put it in perspective. So the question that needs to be asked is exactly what you said, John, is that, okay, someone dug deep enough and found this incident, and it's a reprehensible incident. It's something that you would not want to see happen ever again. But what is your measurable damage? Can you actually measure a damage that you incurred as a result of that emotional intrusion into your brand safety. I've not seen that measure yet. Now, the measure could be that there's money going to groups that we don't want to have money supported by ad revenue. And that I can understand. But I haven't even seen the numbers that relate to that or where they're going. It's a lot of speculation. Talk about fake news. I worry a lot of these sort of exposés on brand safety issues are themselves often fake news. Yeah. And that they're getting very emotional for things that you just got to deal with.
John?
So I think the realm of brand safety has got into how quickly can you respond. So if something happens in the news flow at 10 a.m., can you literally implement a new tactic 1 minute later? I recall one of our customers, Teeds, runs a supply-side network. Well, it's a network, but the publishers. And as we had a terrorist attack in London, Westminster Bridge, it was our obligation to demonstrate we were protecting the brand safety from about 3% of their traffic, jumping up to 9% over the next 30 minutes. And I think if we talk about trust, it's about saying, how can we respond to something that's suddenly unsafe because the news flow has changed? And B, can we give you real-time data on what we're doing? Thirdly, can we be transparent to show you what we're blocking and what we're accepting? And fourthly, do you have the ability to change it yourself right now? So self-serve custom brand safety, real-time is really, I think, where the debate is going, rather than just, is it a bad site, a good site, or the like.
Yeah, to your point, the last person you want to call when you have a brand safety issue today is the lawyer, because that'll just delay everything. You're right. You have to get.
It costs you money, right?
Yeah, right. No problem. You have to get into that conversation and execute the change in an instant. That's exactly the solution to it.
And that reinforces the point that this is not going to be solved purely by manual intervention. It has to rely upon a high degree of technology, and that technology needs to be incredibly responsive in real time to what's going on. So it's good to have people crawling through websites and videos and looking for examples of this, but the advanced technology is going to be the thing that really makes a difference at scale over time.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And the other thing that I would encourage clients in the room to do with their agencies is to do a risk assessment analysis. And so say, where do I want to be as a brand? Am I prepared to take some risks, and what are the implications for my brand? If I'm prepared to take no risks, what are the cost implications for my brand in terms of reach, access to inventory, cost, et cetera, so you should have those conversations, because I think it's important and we have those conversations inside your organization so that the corporate communications can understand that as well. So I'm told that we've got 15 minutes left. I really would like to spend I've got tons of questions for you guys, but I really do want to spend some time on questions from the audience, because I think that's where we get good quality interaction. So if you don't have questions from the audience, I'm happy to continue with mine, but yeah, great, thank you.
I'm keen today, but we'll kick it off. I just wondered if there is a proposal that perhaps I don't know about, but it'd be really interesting to hear if there's a proposal for ranking quality of online advertising space. Is it a sort of quality score that should be introduced into the RTB protocol? How are you thinking about, folks on the buy side, how are you thinking about approaching that and ranking sites?
Okay, so great. That's for people who didn't maybe hear that, is there a proposal for ranking quality of digital sites?
And passing that in real time.
Yeah.
I'll have a first pass at that, because I think this comes back down to communications planning. Is that for every brand, there is a good solution in every medium, and it's a job of the agency to decide what that is across all media. So what do you mean, what is meant by quality? The first thing that one should do in any situation, media planning-wise, is say, what kind of media channels does this brand want to use to reach the maximum effect? And then how are we going to plan those media channels? And things like relevance and context are very important to all brands. It's not just about brand protection and brand safety. It's what is the best environment for my brands to be showcased in. And I think what we're seeing now, and we'll see more of, is a swing back to what I call the basics, which is saying we know that there are issues with long-tail programmatic buying and open exchanges and so on, but that's the wrong perspective. What do we want to achieve? And what channels will give us that, and how should we use those channels to achieve it? So I would say quality is much more a function of what you're trying to achieve in the first place. Being visible in the right context, in the right content, taking a bit of Byron Sharp into account in terms of being present and visible in all the right places, reaching the right audiences in a quality environment. And I hope the fake news debate leads us back to quality journalism. And I really like the fact that the Cambridge Analytica story was broken primarily by good old-fashioned dead tree newspapers. They do digital editions as well, of course. But I think we're seeing a little bit of a shift back now to saying, let's go back to basics and do this right, and then we can prevent a lot of downstream problems.
So thank you very much for a very interesting debate. I have a question in regards to the KPIs you've mentioned. So obviously, all of the brand safety, viewability, and so on and so forth is something that is being preached about since quite a while already. So it's not brand new. It's obviously a topic which is gaining more and more of importance, but it's not brand new. In TV, we are talking about diminishing reach curves since ages as well, and yet a lot of companies are still looking at a CPP purely instead of, for example, moving to cost-per-effective reach. Just like we are talking about now about a CPM instead of a viewable CPM or viewable, targeted, brand safe, and so on CPM. So according to your experience, I'm just curious right now, what is the reason why just very few clients are actually working with the newer, more sophisticated KPI on how to plan and buy instead of what they are having right now? So it's still very old school, even though the whole discussion is happening since years already. And there are not so many companies really applying this.
I think it comes back a little bit to the question that I asked Nick a little earlier on about the relentless pursuit of cost efficiency and measuring the, kind of making sure that we measure the right criteria in ads. John, do you want to add to that?
Well, I was having a conversation with a team, it's a CMO team, where they've taken programmatic in direct, and I was really surprised. There was someone from a well-known boutique, it was Accordant Media, programmatic for years, and he said, in our team, we don't even look at click and conversions. We are so brand lift focused in our brand. Give us some brand awareness metrics. And it was refreshing to almost get to some old TV type brand metrics. And at the heart of their programmatic endeavors, it's got nothing to do with CPMs, clicks, and conversions. It's everything to do with brand lift. And I look around and think, who supplies these types of metrics in real time, other than a 6-week sort of Kantar and other type of report? So there's huge opportunities to get back to some very different old school metrics in programmatic.
Yes, back to basics again. And the point about television is that consistently through time, if you look at all of the published research, television is still, for most brands, the best performing channel for ROI, brand building, long-term, short-term effect, and the protection of margin through reduction in price sensitivity. Unfortunately, it's not the most topical or sexy medium right now. So the advice, I think, is very simple, really, which is any company working with any agency should start at the point that says, what is the best channel mix for my brands and my products? You look at all of the available research, you look at the data, and you plan from there. So if an agency isn't using the most up-to-date research and data to do that, then frankly, they're just not doing the job for which they were hired, and maybe they're not the right agency or they're not the right people within that agency. So as a client, I would say, don't come back to me with anything other than media plans which are designed to be the most effective for my brands. And then once we've decided that together, then we'll talk about the execution of those channels and not the other way around.
Yeah, it's a fair comment. It's interesting, in a sort of a brand safety conversation and talking about quality, I was talking to a very senior brand person in a client. The person was probably in their early 30s, so just in case you were thinking that he was old like me, it wasn't the case. And they're saying that they continue to advertise in television because they know that if they spend 100 GRPs on television or $1 million on television, this is exactly what's going to happen to brand lift, attributions to sales, predisposition to purchase, et cetera, et cetera. So as crude as it may seem to us digital people, television is still a very reliable, transparent medium. And I think that those of us in digital should be very, very aware that it's a very, very powerful medium still.
Can I just add one thing to that, which is that, and all the evidence shows this, is that in terms of digital responsiveness, it is in many instances related back to things like television and other factors. So second screening, I was talking to a retailer last week who uses a lot of television. She said second screening is our best friend because we know that every time we put television advertising out, our website responses go mad, our search responses go mad. This is what agencies should be doing, is they should be looking at cross-channel planning, using the measurement tools available and working out how you get the best uplift. This isn't about digital versus non-digital. It's about planning, and it's about using the channels in a complementary way to influence each other. And particularly when you're talking about online video, where does that sit? Is it digital? Is it TV? Well, the answer is we shouldn't talk in those terms. It's another way of connecting with consumers in a way that you need to be able to demonstrate is an effective way of doing that. If you want to call it television, fine. If you want to call it video, don't mind, as long as you look at it and evaluate it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. Consumers don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to be digital today. Any other questions?
Yes, Lisa.
If you don't, I want to squeeze in one more. One thing that bothers me, and I want to ask John. So here in Europe, and I think in most of the developed world, we think that we've got ad fraud down to low single digits. So we haven't slain the beast. We've certainly caged it, right? But there are a couple of our clients, and kind of me included, thinks, if you haven't discovered what's fraudulent yet, you don't know what's out there. Is there stuff out there that we don't know about? And are you also worried about, there's 1.2% of invalid traffic out there is a number we worry about. And I worry about getting found out and suddenly the London Times says, actually, no, it's 30%.
I think I recall when AppNexus took a very brave step to kind of almost cull or filter their supply prior to offering it, and I mentioned Teads earlier, and I think a lot of people are doing a lot of pre-screening, so there's a lot of good effort. But John, I remember, I think last time we saw each other was in Shanghai, so if you're a Unilever and you're advertising in the Chinese market, it's very different, and I think a lot of global brands have to be very careful about which territories they're in and what kind of tools can actually exist. Some of these territories don't run with JavaScript. There's no sort of particular technology ways of actually getting to the heart of the problem. And I think we should be thankful that we've actually got some very basic standards. We've got a few dominant ad servers out there that actually carry essentially a lot of metrics. In other territories, it's a kind of Wild West relatively. I do think fake news is a more superior threat. I think there's tools, Integral, Moat, Double Verify, and others all have really good technologies to start to filter at a page-by-page level. But it's really putting your brand, as Nick said, in the right context or in the wrong context per brand. So back to the quality question before, I don't think there's a uniform sense of quality. I think brands have their very particular needs. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And I think you always point out that fraud is really just an economic risk. You're misusing a percentage of your budget because it's misplaced, it doesn't reach a consumer. What really matters is that 90%, even 80%, 70% of the real consumers that really respond to that story. And that's why viewability and context are so important.
So the last word on me on that is, I absolutely understand why ad fraud and brand safety are big issues for clients, absolutely agree. Viewability is actually a bigger issue because ad fraud may be down to 3% or whatever. Brand safety you can measure, but if the majority of your advertising simply isn't being exposed to consumers, it stands no chance of working and therefore can't be effective. So, I think there's a slight eclipse factor here about fraud and brand safety on one of the core problems, which is that viewability scores are only creeping up, and they're still roughly around the sort of 50-55% mark, at a very low threshold of acceptance. So viewability is a much bigger deal, really, in some ways, for effectiveness than issues like ad fraud and brand safety, important though those are.
And on that bombshell.
One quick thought.
Sorry, Doug.
One simple addition on that is
last,
what scares me, I promise, it's 5 seconds. White Ops, you all know White Ops, they've done a lot of really good work. They once said to me that one thing we have to understand is that as smart and as good as our programmers are, they're going to have smarter programmers because they'll pay them more money. They'll put them in countries where they have no jurisdiction to get them, in countries that don't care about the law. So this, if we become complacent, John, that percentage, whatever the real percentage, will just go up. You have to keep this fight on.
The cheaters are always one step ahead of the chasers.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much. It was a terrific panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.